There we go. So I forgot, I apologize, I forgot to record this. I know that it's not important for most of you, but anyway, I'm starting to record this. So these are your variables. Now you're still pretty much working in the dark when you do that, but as soon as you click OK, you can see that I'm rotating and it's offsetting in a negative fashion here. So if we look at the top view, we look at the back view, and maybe more important, we zoom out here and you can see. So extremely useful for making, clones of just about anything, multiples. And if you want to just move them, you can do that. If you want to change scale, if you want to change the rotation, heading, pitch, or bank, that sort of thing, you can do that with each successive clone. So that's one of the things that you can do. I like the array tool a little bit better. And the array tool is found underneath more, under the same category. And the reason I like the array tool is because, okay, hold on here, let me make sure that I bring up numerical question. Oh, come on, where are you? Let me turn it off. Oops, cancel. Oh, maybe I didn't select it. Okay, well, I do have it. So let's turn it off. Let's make sure that I have the numeric requester up. No. Why isn't it showing up? There we go, okay. When I was hitting the N key, it still wasn't popping up. So anyway, with that visible, I'm gonna go ahead and show, array again. There we go, that's what I want. So now I have array selected, and let's go ahead and reset. And now you can determine the count from here. So I have 3 along the X, 3 along the Y, and 3 along the Z, and I'm offsetting 3 meters. And now if I go ahead and I go to actions and I activate, I should see, let's see, hopefully, no, this is supposed to preview and it's not previewing for me. It was just, let's make sure that we don't need any randomization. We have our offset from the 0, 0, 0. Let me move, no, why isn't it working, folks? Well, let's go ahead and, no. Well, let me just change the offset from X, Y, and Z to 3 and 3 and 3 and see if I get any. No, it's not working for me. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. So let's turn off the array. And I'm going to undo and see if I can't get it to work again. I'm going to go back and also select polygons instead. Let me go back again. Let's select array. There we go. Now it's working. Why before it wasn't, I don't know. But as you can see, and so now, if I move this down, I zoom in a little bit so we can see this a little bit better from perspective. But if I change some of the parameters here, so right now I have a count of 3 along the X, Y, and Z, and let's say I only want to count along, 2 along the Y, or if I want 5 along the Y. And I zoom out here a little bit. You can see, you can preview this quite nicely. And right now, this is rectangular. Now watch what happens when we do this in a radial array. Okay. So now it's following, this is the center point and rotating along that path. So right now I have radial count of 8. If you want to increase that, you have more. If you want fewer, like so. You can create, adjudge the start angle. You can change the end angle, and you can change the offset. So remember when we were using the lathe tool before, I said this is how you create a spring. Well, let me go ahead and let's change this from 360 to 1360. Okay, and let's change the radial count to, let's say 17, for example. And now let's change the offset like so. And you can see, similar to the spring, these are duplicating, but kind of in a corkscrew fashion. Really kind of cool. I mean, these can be very useful. So for the Montserrat and you guys in the advanced class, when you're doing your multiples, this would be the tool that I would use to take your model and create multiples of it. And that would be pretty nice. Why it wasn't working the first time, I don't have a clue. But anyway, we'll go ahead and we'll stop that. So I'm going to end that, and I'm going to undo. So some of the other things that I wanted to talk about is, adding geometry. And we've done that a variety of different ways in here. Okay. So we can do that at the onset. So if I go ahead and I delete this and I just start again with a simple box. And we go to action and we go ahead and reset and we activate. Okay. We can do that by adding segments here. So if you want an even distribution of geometry throughout, you can do that. Right now, we just have one segment, one segment, one segment. Okay, and if we view this, I'll move this over a little bit. Zoom out a little bit. And let's look in here. So let's go ahead and let's change some of these. Let's go ahead and increase. I don't want any radial segments there. Let's go ahead and along the X, along the Y, and along the Z. So if you know in advance that you want some extra geometry and you want it evenly distributed, this would be the way to go. Okay. But if you don't, and you want to add it later, remember you could always use subdivide. That's one way. But let's go ahead and fix this. And let's try some other ways of doing this. I'm going to move this up a little bit too. So I'm going to hit T for move, and I want to move this box up so that it's sitting right here on top of the grid so you can see this a little bit better. So one way of adding geometry, if you know precisely where you want to add it, is to use the knife tool. But you have to remember when you're using the knife tool, and it's true for many of these other tools for slicing these up or adding geometry, is to, that it has to cut all the way through. So if I hit Shift K and I decide, okay, I just want to slice down here. Oops, I didn't want Shift K. There we go. Now I slice it across here, and I hit the space bar. You can see across the whole thing, I've added some geometry. That's one way of doing it, okay? And another way of doing it, if you want to add geometry, and it's something that I haven't talked about that much, is that you can use, it's under multiply, and let's see where we go here. Maybe it was under, I can't remember half the time whether it's under multiply or, Oh, it is here. It's Bandsaw Pro. That's what I wanted. But it's grayed out. So it is under the multiply tab. So for example, what if I wanted multiple slices along here? Well, you can select just one polygon or multiples to determine which way you want it sliced. So I want it sliced horizontally. So I'm selecting 2 polygons, and that helps me to direct that. So now I can go ahead and with those 2 polygons selected, now I can select Bandsaw Pro. And you can see that I have 2 slices already. I can go back here and I can go to Actions and I can reset. And I don't have any at the moment, but there's a default slice down the middle. And I can go ahead and click Enable Divide. Now the reason it's going horizontal is because I had those 2 polygons selected and it assumed that I wanted that. I can also edit. And to edit that, you can go ahead and I can slide this up and down like so. If I want to add, I can go ahead and add here. And I can click and I can add as many divisions as I want. And for each of those divisions, you can go ahead and you can specify, okay, where you want those to go, whether you want them evenly distributed or you want them in a specific location. So that's another way of dividing. Okay, so that is the Bandsaw Pro. That's another way of doing that. Okay. Another way of doing that is that we can do it by segments. So for example, if I were to, or not segments, if I can select edges. So for example, if I select an edge, now this I find a little awkward because I have to use my mouse and I'm working on a, not because I have to use the mouse, it's just that I'm using my, my laptop and I'm accustomed to using the touchpad. But this, you have to use the mouse in order to do this. So again, if we go under, detail, and we say that we want to edit edges, okay? And you have to have an edge selected. Now, if I right click, come on, make sure that I have it. And I click on that edge, notice that it added one perpendicular to it. And what I can do now with the left mouse is I can move that up or down. Okay. Now I can do it in percentages here, and I can change the distance like so if you want. So you can always use the numeric requester. And again, where sometimes these are very helpful is that, especially if you're using subpatches, for example. So if I'm done with editing that edge, and I hit the Tab key, notice that it tightens up the top part where I added that edge. Okay, that's where that's very useful. That's one of the ways that it's useful, aside from adding geometry. And I think everybody now understands how to use the bevel and subpatch, or bevel and smooth shift rather. So that's another way of doing that. Another way to join objects together. So let me undo this, for example. And I'm going to take, and I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm going to create 2 spheres, okay, 2 balls. So let's go ahead here, and I'm going to go to Action, Reset. I'm going to activate. Okey doke. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to make a duplicate of it up here. Okay, so we have 2. And we want to join these 2 together to create another object, kind of like a barbell kind of thing. Well, what you have to do, and this is similar to when we used the weld tool, that I could take, let's go ahead and let's select polygons here. And I'm going to select a group of polygons here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kill them, or just, I'm going to delete them. And I'm going to select these points. This would be easier for me if I do it this way, especially because it's a sphere. If it weren't a sphere, I wouldn't have to do this. And I don't want to select these. Hold on, let me zoom in a little bit. And select that. Let me zoom in a little so I can see this a little bit better. I have a little bit better control over my mouse. Okay, I'm going to make a poly out of that. So everybody sees over here how I've done that. And I'm going to do the same to the top. Just because you have to have the same point count, same as when we were welding early on in the semester, the foot to the leg. So the same principle. So if I go ahead and I go polygons, let's see, select. I'm going to right click and drag around here. Okay, let's go ahead and cut those and then switch to points. And let's go ahead and right click and drag around here. And hit P for poly. Now what I want to do is I want to join these two together. So to do that, I'm going to select each of the polys. Let's make sure that I have poly selected. And that one is already selected from my last action. I select these two. And then I can go under multiply. And what I want to do, hold on here, that might be under, hold on here. No, I think it's under detail. No. I can never remember. My memory's going, folks. Maybe it is under multiply.
Are you looking for bridge?
Yep. Is it under multiply?
It's under detail, I think.
It is detail. Is it down here? No.
Try construct.
Yeah, it could be construct. There we go. I can't half the time, unless I've just used it.
There it is.
There we go. There's bridge. So now with these two polys selected, and again, half the time, it takes me longer to find these tools half the time as to actually use them. And now with these two polys selected, when you select that, notice that it bridges those two together. And especially because I have not deviated from any, well, I do have n-gons selected, and that's not desirable. If I had quads, it would be a better choice. But now if I deselect these and I hit the tab key, notice what I have. So if you're wanting how to create something like this, it's not a, bad way to go. These sub patches. Okay, so that's the bridge tool. It works a little bit faster than using weld. But again, like weld, when you're going to weld objects together, you have to make sure that you have the same number of points on each to do that. And so that's why I was doing this. It doesn't have to be two spheres. It could be two very different objects, just as long as you have the same point count on each. Okay. So that's that. Another one that I forgot about here is, let's see. If I have these two, let's switch back to edges because I want to divide this again, but this I caution you about using. You have to be careful when you're doing this. I think this is under detail. And I wanted to, let's come down here, is I wanted to, I don't want to add edges. Maybe it was multiply. I want to slice. Or actually, no, I don't. I want to connect. And you'll see that I've connected those two edges by doing that. So now I have a slice, I have extra geometry right down the middle here. But where we run into difficulty is that it's not like the knife tool. This doesn't cut all the way through. So if I choose to go ahead and I want to use subpatches and I hit the tab key, now I have an issue. So that doesn't work. You have to think a little bit differently if you're going to work with subpatches. However, if I was going to leave it, kind of in this state, what I could do is I could select the polygon tool and I could select this poly here, and I could hit V for bevel, and I could go ahead and then hit T for move and pull it out. Okay, so see how I've added the geometry? Like so. So as long as I'm not planning on using subpatches, I'm okay. However, let's see something here. If I switch down here and let's deselect the polygon. And if I switch from subpatches to Capsule Clark, and now I hit the tab key, I do get something, but you'll notice that it will work more effectively. But you can get some interesting organic shapes that way. So sometimes if you do something like that with partial slices, that don't cut all the way through, and you wind up with these fragmented areas, you might want to try Capsule Clark instead of using the subpatch mode. But when I go back, I have it like that. So again, that's another way of adding geometry, of slicing, doing that. And let me go ahead and undo a couple of times. And another one, it's very similar, is let's go ahead and select again. Now I used, let me go ahead and let's connect. Let's try again. Now let's try slice. And this allows you, when you slice it, now connect, connects it vertically right in the middle. But now when I use slice, it allows me to slice it diagonally. And I can move these points along the path. So I can take that, select that point, let's switch the points. So there's a gazillion ways to work here. T for move. So now I can slice, I can move this around like so. So maybe, if I were making an image like that. Let's move that up. Okay. Let's turn off T for move. Let's deselect it. And again, as long as I have, if I want to leave it in its, poly mode, I don't have to worry about anything. I'm good to go. But again, as soon as I hit subpatch, because I have irregularly, or I haven't sliced all the way through, which may have been a better way to go, but if I want to minimize the geometry, then I could leave it like this, especially if I wanted to use the Capsule Clark, and I hit the tab key. And again, this really, really rounds it off. So what you might want to do is if you want to exaggerate that, the forms, then under modify, we could use the drag tool, and I could stretch these out like so. Yeah. So there's a variety of things that you can create this way. Just lots of different ways of doing this that we just haven't really covered. We've covered the basics, but there's just a gazillion different ways of doing this. And I wish there was more support for this to take you step by step through all of these, but there's so many versions of these. It's just nuts. Many of these that I haven't, really explored much myself. as you can tell, because I forget where they're located. Now I think that's half the battle, is if you can remember where they're located, then you're in pretty good shape. Then we can switch again. We can switch to poly mode. And I select this poly and this one, for example. Then I use the bevel tool, E for bevel. Okay. And we hit T for move. And move these guys out. So you can begin to see that you can see some interesting forms that you can create doing this. All organically. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to show you, something that's, let's go back to create again, that we really haven't touched on much. And I believe I covered this a little bit, but some under primitives, if we go back to primitives, we have our basic box for box modeling and the ball, the disc, the cone, but there's a bunch more down here that I don't know if many of you have explored any of those. But for example, if I want to start with gears, and I'm just going to use the default settings here. Very quick way of making some of these objects that I guess, for more industrial purposes or things like that, you can create things really, really, very quickly. And again, they're considered primitives. So that would be one. When we go back again, there's more. Gemstones, which are really pretty cool. So there's gears, gemstones, which are pretty nice. And let's go ahead and let's start with the default. If I go back to reset and I go to activate, wait a minute, do I have it selected? I hope I do. Okay. Let's go ahead and it's not working for some reason. So let me turn it off. I'm having the same problem.
I think you have to drag it like a box.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. Let's zoom in a little bit and see. So here's a basic gemstone or diamond-like shape. And then again, you can control the radius or all the different components of a gem. So for example, symmetry, do you want 8 sides? What's the radius of this thing? No, you want it nice, big, and fat. You want it narrow. Okay. You can determine the center here. You can determine the radius. You can determine the symmetry. How many sides do you want for that? You can determine the crown. Okay, how high do you want it? How low do you want it? The girdle, which is the center portion of that, and the table. Okay. And the pavilion. Okay, when you're all done, we'll go back to more, and we select turn off gemstone, and you have a gem. Okay. Never had a need for this. Anybody else? Have you ever used it? Anybody?
I used it for an image I did a while back, just for fun.
Yeah, that's it. I guess at some point, I can understand gears if you're going to do a lot of industrial stuff. That would make a lot of sense. There's no need for gemstones, but there's a lot of these here that you guys might want to try. Actually, a while back, my favorite one is you'll notice that we have equilateral triangles, wedges, super quadratics, platonics. My favorite, though, if I can find it, is the torus or toroid one. So let's go back here. I want the torus shape. So again, I'm going to action, reset. And it's basically a donut shape. Okay. So again, you can control how fat you want this to be. You can control the radius of this thing. You can start and stop angles and that sort of thing. Instead of, I mean, you could take a circle and you could lathe it and get the same result. But this is considered a primitive, so it's just another way of making them form. Okay, lots of good stuff in here. And it's just a matter of playing with a lot of these things. So let's go back here. Let's turn that on. Another one that I believe I showed you, but it's still worth showing again, I think, is like the capsule tool. Hold on here. Okay, once it's similar to that gemstone. You got to remember to click and drag and make it. And then you can come back in here and you can determine where you want it centered. You can determine the radius of this thing. And you can determine the length of it. And you can determine, again, like other objects that we've created, you want the default 24 sides, you want more, you want less. How many segments do you want vertically, horizontally, that sort of thing. How many divisions? And there. Okay, so there we have that. So that's the capsule tool. So I've gone over some of these pretty quickly, but again, as I said, it kind of in a shotgun approach, bounced around from adding geometry to working with some additional primitives and that sort of thing. One of the other things that I would like to show you, that I'll probably show you Wednesday, that we haven't talked about much, but there's more. We've covered UV maps, and we've covered projection maps, and we've covered image maps, and we've covered procedurals and that sort of thing. But we haven't covered weight maps, and we haven't covered gradient maps. And those get even more complicated. But again, it's worth watching a couple of video tutorials on those to see what those are like. So that's where I'll go on Wednesday. So it may even take us less time to cover some of these things. Based on, text. We haven't covered text yet either. So let me go ahead and do that. That's one thing. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. And then that's we can add some text. So I'll just click here and I'll say text. So TEXT. Okay. And it gives us a two-dimensional plane. And you can either do, left, centered, or right, whichever works for you. And then you have to, here, select a font you plan on extruding. So let's say, Arial Black, nice big fat typeface, like so. And you can determine the scale of this from here. So let's go 200%. Make it nice and big so you can see that. So once you've created your text and you're interested in creating 3D text, we can go ahead now and select and turn that off. And I have our 2D text here. And if we look at that, we haven't really covered text at all, but if this is something that you wanted to add to one of your objects, you could do so. And now to give it dimensions, we could go to multiply, and we could go ahead and we could go to extrude. And now let's go from here, pull it back. And I have three-dimensional text. And if you want to bevel this, you can do that. There's a variety of things that we have available to us. Now you'll notice with some of these things, this gets a little bit weird. So let me take this and see if this is a separate poly that I can get rid of maybe. Here. Yeah, sometimes text gets a little weird. What I have found that works probably better for me, instead of using their text tool, and Dan, I don't know if you've experienced this, is that if I wanted to bring a unique text or, typeface in here and extrude it, I found that it was easier to go into a program like Illustrator and export it as an EPS file, and then import it into Lightwave, and then extrude it from there.
Huh.
So
I've never tried it that way.
the same for paths. That's also been the case. That I really hated down here. We have our sketch tool, and I use that for the path extrude that you can draw like so. You can draw a curve or you can draw a face, but you have to specify ahead of time. So let me reset this and let's undo. So let's say if I wanted to create a face and I wanted it to be irregular. I find it really hard to draw with this thing because I am left-handed, but I work my mouse with my right hand. So here I have an irregular shape that I can extrude and do all sorts of things. But if I'm going to do something irregular like this, I found it easier and I have more control over it if I use a program like Adobe Illustrator. Create the shape that I want, export it, and I also use fewer points to create a more accurate shape. And then bring it in here and then use lathe or use extrude or whatever to create my three-dimensional form, but export it as an EPS file. So that's for the sketch tool. Then we have Bezier. And again, I really, the Bezier functions like Illustrator, but it doesn't. I've always, and it's similar, do you want it closed or do you want it an open path? It's up to you. And right now it's left open. And if I do that, now I can come back in with these little handles. Similar to Illustrator, working with Bezier curves, and you can manipulate them. But I've always found it really awkward to use the tools in here. I really hate them. So I go back, to clean all of this up, and I find it much easier just to create a Bezier path or shape in Illustrator and then import it as an EPS file. So that's what I've always done. Okay, and then when we fix it like so, but look at all the points it creates, and it doesn't need so many points to do that, especially when you're working from Illustrator. And then the last one is Spline Draw. And it's even more awkward. It's similar to using the curvature tool in Illustrator. And again, do you want, how many points do you want? How many, do you want an open or close? It's just, I've always found it very awkward to use. You can manipulate this and create our path. But you can use it to have a camera follow a path, or you can have it, use it for any number of things. Or use it for the tool that I showed you, that path extrude. But that's what these do down here. Again, I found it much easier to do that in Illustrator than use the tools that they have in here. So, curve, spline cage, no, I haven't used any of those. Again, there's so many more things that I just haven't touched on. Just kind of throwing things out here today. That's pretty much all I wanted to show you today. Nothing else. Anybody have any questions? I'll go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to